Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Course of World History. I'm your host, Mr. Samuelson, and today we are looking at Ming Dynasty, China, in our unit where we're discussing land-based empires of Asia. Our essential question for today is, how did the Ming restore China to the Chinese? So let's back up and talk about the Yuan Dynasty. From 1271 to 1368, about 100 years, China was governed by the Mongols. That is, they had a foreign ruler that had come in and dominated Chinese society. Now, in 1271, this was Kublai Khan, this handsome fella right here, who came in and established this Chinese-like dynasty. And he did try to mimic a lot of Chinese practice and therefore find himself more acceptable to the Chinese. But over time, his dynasty's hold on China did weaken. Now, the Red Turban Rebellion is going to be what kind of puts the nail in the coffin of the Yuan dynasty. In 1351, a group of Chinese rebelled against the Mongols, and this rebellion was based upon poor government management of some natural disasters. There was a major flood and a famine, and the Mongol Yuan dynasty did not manage that well, led to a lot of discontent amongst the Chinese, and the Red Turban Rebellion was able to turn that discontent into rebellion and eventually into a new dynasty. Now, the leader of this rebellion was, and I apologize, Xuan Jiang, and I think I'm close on that. Xuan Jiang was one of the Red Turban leaders and led to the capture of an important city in China, Nanjing, their southern capital city. Now, with that capital city as a base of power, others said, wow, these guys actually have a chance. This is a significant rebellion. They captured Nanjing. Oh, my. And he started to pick up a lot of followers following such a victory. And by 1368, he had expanded from Nanjing into the north and had conquered most of China and established a new dynastic rule over the country, the Ming Dynasty. Now, Xuan Jiang takes a new dynastic title as he steps up to be Emperor of Japan, and he becomes known as the Hongwu Emperor. Hongwu means roughly vastly martial. And he was a vastly martial person. That is, he was involved in warfare. He spent almost his entire reign as Emperor of China at war, really focused on two areas: restoring Chinese rule to China, that is, getting the Mongols out, and then defending against foreigners, that is, keeping Mongols and others out of China, building China for the Chinese. This leads to a Chinese restoration. This Hongwu Emperor, the vastly martial emperor, had to convince all of China to accept his rule. And he spends almost all of his reign fighting against Mongol loyalists and other Chinese rebel groups that are seeing the collapse of the Mongols and thinking to themselves that they can start their own dynasty and their own emperor. So he has to fight not just against the Mongols, but also against other Chinese. Now, once in charge, he wants to make sure that China has a Chinese flavor, and to do that, he reaches back in the past to a time of Chinese power before they were threatened with the Mongols. To do this, he looks back to the Tang Dynasty and builds a new law code based upon Confucian principles that were in vogue, that were popular during the Tang Dynasty. An idea of make China great again by looking to the past. Now, he was an absolute ruler. Now, the Mongols had used thousands of Chinese to govern China. They were very adept at making sure that Mongols did this. They did this with whomever they captured. They used the local people to run money aspects of the governor. But the Hongwu Emperor, the Ming Dynasty, wanted to erase this memory, this threat, sees anybody who had worked with the Mongols during that 100 years as a conspirator, as an enemy of China. And so those people were rooted out and they were killed. Over 100,000 government bureaucrats, people who had helped the Mongol during the Yuan time, were killed during the Hongwu Emperor's reign. Now, Hongwu Emperor doesn't live forever. We all die, and someday one day the Hongwu Emperor did. After he died, there was an internal struggle for power between a couple of claimants to the throne. But the one who comes out on top is the Yongle Emperor, who takes a great idea here. If you want to get rid of all of your rivals to the throne, why don't you just kill them all? And that's what the Yongle Emperor did. He burned the home of his nephew and his nephew's family, wiping out that branch of the of Chinese rule and seizing power for himself. Now, the Yongle Emperor is a very different fellow than the Hongwu. Hongwu Emperor focused internally, had a lot of issues to take care of at home, more Chinese China. The Yongle Emperor focused externally on expanding China and engaging more with the world. And over a period of about 20 years, China is going to fight to expand their borders and to expand their trade. The best example of the expansion of trade is with the Chinese treasure fleet. The Yongle Emperor places Zheng He in command of a giant treasure fleet, this fleet down here, with more than 1,000 ships and some really big ones, these treasure ships, more than 60 of those in his fleet that were about 1.5 football fields long. Here you see it compared to Christopher Columbus's flagship, the Santa Maria. This is the typical treasure ship. So a much larger ship than was being built anywhere in the world at that time. Now, Zheng He did lead 7 trade missions with this massive fleet. He visited ports as far away from Ming China as the Swahili states of East Africa. With these voyages, he spread the knowledge of China and its wealth around the world, but they didn't gain much from it. Zheng He's trips didn't bring much wealth back to China. Financially, they were actually a disaster. The Ming did not make money on this. They lost money on it. So that was a problem that the Ming had under the Yongle Emperor. Another problem was the Yongle Emperor's plan to end Mongol threats. He wanted to go in and capture Mongolia. He wanted to attack Mongolia itself and forever eliminate the threats of the Mongols. Problem is, while invading Mongolia, the Yongle Emperor himself becomes sick and dies. Well, Mongols don't stop attacking, and periodically they keep breaking into China, trying to recapture China and end the Ming Dynasty. The trade fleet had been a huge expense and a huge loss, and the Ming are just kind of done with this. Their Yongle adventurism, their attempt to explore and conquer the world had cost them a lot. They weren't interested in continuing it, and so they started to withdraw from the world, and they enter into a period of deep isolationism. An example of that isolationism is the expanse of the Great Wall of China during this time. Now, the Great Wall was not created by the Ming, and it was created far before the Ming, but the Ming are going to extend sections of the Great Wall, and they're going to repair sections of the Great Wall. And by the end of their dynasty, the Great Wall of China was 5,500 miles long, serving as a border primarily against the Mongols, but other people from the north as well, to control trade and crossing of the border. People were not allowed to enter China. All right, that is all that I have for you today. Next time we'll look at how the Ming start to collapse. But until then, farewell.